Welcome to Radiance Unfiltered. I'm Lily and this is Maddie and we're the hosts of your first episode. So Radiance Unfiltered covers all types of skin conditions that typically affects you when you're reaching your mid to late 20s. So our first topic will be adult eczema and alopecia and also answering your wild comments we've been seeing on our TikTok videos. So our first guest today is Dr. Malik and he's here to give us some eczema and alopecia advice and to answer all of your questions. So as I said earlier, we're going to be covering adult eczema. So please, Dr. Malik, can you introduce yourself?
Dr. Kunal Malik. I'm based in New York City. I'm a board certified dermatologist, and I see these are great topics because I actually do see a lot of eczema and alopecia in my practice. And so I'm happy to answer the questions, and I'm interested in seeing what kind of wild questions your audience posed for you.
Brilliant. Thank you for coming on.
So what would you say typically causes eczema?
I wish it was just like a quick one-liner. It's actually not. It's very multifactorial, right? So there's definitely like there's a genetic predisposition to it, that can definitely affect our skin's barrier, the topmost layer of it. So we have known gene defects that can affect that barrier, but it's not even as simple as just like dry skin. Like the genetics is only one component of it. And then the dry skin that comes with an impaired barrier leads to immune system involvement as well, right? And so there's an excess amount of inflammation. There's a lot of trigger factors, which I'm sure we'll get into as well. So there's actually a lot of research still going on in the world of eczema to sort of figure out like what exactly causes it. And so right now we think it's a combination of genetics that lead to impaired skin barrier as well as inflammation, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely does. So what usually causes it when you reach your adulthood? Because obviously children and adults can have eczema. So what usually causes the flare-ups in your adulthood?
So I think there's a lot of different reasons why people in adulthood get it. I see it's actually like around 10% of people after mid-20s will have eczema. So if you consider the world's population, that's actually a big number. And so there's quite a number of triggers. So stress, right? So increased cortisol responses have been shown to lead to eczema flares. There's some thought that maybe hormonal fluctuations in the case of like perimenopause for women can cause it. A lot of it is also environmental driven, right? And so different occupations and occupational irritants pose different hazards, right? And so like patients who are cleaners and just in contact with aerosols are a little bit more likely to get it. Sudden climate changes for people who are traveling all the time will do it. And we're even learning certain foods will do it as well. And also, even outside of all of these factors, like as we age, our skin barrier function naturally decreases. And so like what I was saying earlier, like that in of itself leads to eczema development too.
Perfect. And what would you say the most common mistakes people normally make when they're treating it are?
So the most common one is like a patient will come to me and be like, oh, like I take 30-minute hot showers. And I'm like, okay, well, if your skin barrier is like impaired and you already have dry skin, maybe, I hate to say this because, a hot shower can be like a joy of life and you don't want to take it away too much, but you can't really be doing that day in, day out if you're someone who suffers from eczema or is a little bit higher risk for it. So I typically tell patients lukewarm water, you kind of go in the shower, do what you have to do, get in, get out, right? Like don't spend a lot of time. You would think being in the water is like hydrating you, but it's actually stripping, your skin barrier even more. And so that's number one. I think a lot of patients are a little inconsistent with moisturizing. I personally, I kind of am too, right? I'm a little bit, right? It's hard to focus on moisturizing your body. I think we care in general a lot more for our face than we do for our body. And so I think most people can do a better job of moisturizing the body as well. And that means year round, not just in the fall or winter time. And then, another one that I see commonly is like people will, go to town and really itch their eczema spots. That will lead to more eczema happening over time, even though it's so tempting to itch it. I mean, you're itching it because it's itchy, but, you have to understand, the more you're itching it, the more physical damage you're causing to your skin barrier and, your eczema might flare even more.
it's funny you should say that, because obviously the viewers didn't see this and you didn't either, but our teammate also suffers from eczema. And when you said about the hot shower thing, she was like, oh, I do that. So we've definitely learned something. So this is quite similar to the previous question, but what are the most common eczema triggers?
And so, just going back to the shower, I think a lot of them are found in the shower too, where people are maybe potentially using not, the right products for them. If they have eczema, I typically tell patients to kind of steer clear from harsh soaps or heavily fragranced products. Even outside of the shower, the clothes you're dressing yourself in, they should be wool or, like they should not be wool or synthetic fabrics that can actually lead to eczema development. A lot of environmental triggers exist as well: pet dander, pollen, certain foods, like I mentioned earlier. We're still learning a little bit more about that. I typically recommend patients wear like loose fitting, cotton based clothes. Try to, use fragrance free products whenever possible. Manage stress levels, going back to that we were talking about earlier. While the diet is like not really universally established, like I can't say like X food will in every patient cause eczema flares. I think it's a little bit more individual and patient dependent. And so I tell patients to like take note, like create like a little food diary and see like what are you doing when your eczema flares. And so the better we can track those triggers, the better success we can have in treating and managing this.
I'd never even thought about food as a factor at all.
No, me neither. And lots of dermatologists do talk about food when like influencing your skin, and I would never even consider that.
No, me neither. Would you say in that sense there's any other less commonly known things about eczema that people could be doing but they're not necessarily doing at the moment?
I think so. At least here, I can talk about the weather in New York City because I'm from here. But when it gets colder, which I'm sure by you, it gets colder at some point as well. But when it's cold and dry here, I think adding in a humidifier is really important. Like just even in your living room, right? And that makes a pretty big difference for people. In the wintertime, most of my patients will take those hot showers, understandably, and so that just going back to that point, it's a little important to talk about that. And then moisturizing, right? And then using the right products. So it's all sort of interrelated and tied together.
Sometimes like the smaller things that actually make the difference. And people think that they need like these treatments and loads of pills and stuff like that, when in reality it's those tiny things you do in your day-to-day life, I'm finding.
I mean, not to completely say like treatments are like bad. Like, as a dermatologist, I prescribe a lot of them, but I always make sure to let people know expectations wise. Like if you're just taking whatever medication I give you, sure, it'll help. But long term, there's like some lifestyle things that we have to work with too, because they kind of complement each other. You can't just do one without the other.
Okay, so these are actually our questions about eczema, but as neither of us suffer with it, we did pose the question to our Instagram followers, and we did get a couple of very specific questions that they would like to know about. So the first one is that one of our followers says that she finds that it's very concentrated in certain parts of your body and it doesn't tend to spread to others. So I didn't know that, for example. So I wonder if you could give her a little bit of advice on that.
Yeah, so eczema, so like just going back to what I was saying about the skin barrier, naturally, even for like patients who don't have eczema, our skin is just thinner in certain areas, and so those thinner areas are even higher risk for eczema developing, and so that's why patients will have a higher chance of getting eczema in certain areas, like so your body folds, like right in front of your elbows, your eyelids, right? Like some of the most thin areas of the face and the body are a little bit more prone to getting dry, and the barrier is more prone to getting damaged, and all of that leads to eczema. And so, like I was saying, in front of the elbows is common. Around, like behind the knees, for example, is another one that's a common area. Around the face is very common too.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And I also don't have eczema, but I have found that after shaving, I have quite sensitive armpits. And our readers have also asked, do you have any type of recommendation for buying deodorants at all, or anything to look out for?
Yeah, for eczema patients in particular. Yeah. Deodorant, I mean, I think it's important to like, a lot of people don't realize that like deodorant is different than antiperspirant. deodorant is just masking the smell with fragrances, right? And so that's probably, if you're someone with eczema, like I was saying with the fragrance point earlier, it may potentially lead to triggers. So you really want to look for an antiperspirant and sort of address the root of the issue rather than just masking the odor. And also, a lot of people don't know this, but at night is when I typically recommend applying the antiperspirant because that's when your sweat-producing glands are least active, and so you want to plug them up as when they're not making sweat. Because if you're using it during the day, like most people do, I mean, you're getting some benefit, but not you're not utilizing its full potential. In terms of like eczema patients and what deodorants and antiperspirants they should get, there's a brand here in the States called Vanny Cream. I don't know if you guys have it over there, but that's usually my go-to recommendation. It has the seal of approval from like the National Eczema Association, and it's really free of a lot of the triggering factors that can trigger eczema.
Okay. And the next question, I didn't know that people depending on people whether it would flare up like in the summer or in the winter. But our follower clearly has eczema that flares up in the colder weather, so in the wintertime. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, so just it all kind of makes sense, right? Because like in the wintertime is the most common time for eczema and flare because the wintertime is when our skin is at driest, most probably, and when all of that environmental stress is kind of adding up on your skin. And so whatever dries out your skin and leads to damaging that skin barrier is when that eczema is gonna flare. And also just I think more people are taking hot showers in the wintertime than in the summer.
Oh, that links together,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It all makes sense in the end.
And I know you were talking about genetics possibly being a factor earlier, but our follower asked, is there anything that predisposes you to it, and can it affect your children if you also have it?
Yes, potentially. So we do know that there are genetic factors that are involved in, the eczema developing, and a lot of them, like I said earlier, are still being sort of figured out. But it for sure, like if even in clinic, like when I'm seeing patients and they tell me like, oh, my mom or my sister or like immediate family members have eczema, that already puts you at higher risk of eczema. And it's not even just eczema, like even if there's a family history of like, hay fever, seasonal allergies, pollen, all of these things, that puts people at risk at eczema. And then also if you have certain food allergies and asthma as well. So we call it the atopic triad, meaning all of eczema is not like a standalone condition. It's associated with other things as well.
Okay, and our last follower question. We mentioned earlier that it's sometimes flares up in different areas of your body. So she asked how to get rid of eczema on your hairline, because I imagine that's quite a tricky place because you're brushing your hair, especially if you have long hair. You tend to rub it a lot. If it's itchy, it's easy to scratch. So
Yeah, so that area in particular may require a visit to a dermatologist because we have, it's hard with over-the-counter options. I mean, there's not much, everything is mostly designed for the skin and not like hair-bearing sites. And so, I mean, as you can imagine, it's like hard to put like a cream or moisturizer on your scalp with all of the hair there. And so, in dermatology, at least in the States, we have a lot of different foams and solutions, like topical solutions that we can offer patients that really do a wonderful job in managing people's eczema.
brilliant, thank you. Well, that answers all of our followers' questions about eczema, at least.
And on the topic of hair care, we're going to be branching into alopecia. So would you be able to explain a little bit about what causes it, what causes hair loss, and what it consists of, basically?
Yes. So in a nutshell, alopecia is not a diagnosis, it's just a medical term for hair loss. Under that umbrella term of alopecia, there's actually a lot of different types of hair loss, and so it's complicated, right? There's like male pattern, female pattern hair loss, which I think most of us are aware of, right? Which is basically age related. But outside of that, there can also be autoimmune hair type of hair loss, like alopecia areata. There could be, some sort of like a trigger factor that can cause people's alopecia, and we call that telogen effluvium. And so I don't want to confuse people, but basically there's a lot of different types of alopecia. Alopecia is not a diagnosis, it just means hair loss. It's important to see a dermatologist because we examine the scalp, we ask the right questions, we do the right workup and figure out what kind of alopecia you have because not all of them are treated the same way.
Okay, well, on that topic, because I know this is probably a very broad question, but is there anything people can be doing to prevent it? As you said, some of them are autoimmune, so I imagine not, but
Prevention, I think, is a little bit more relevant to like hormonal or male or female pattern hair loss, right? Because the other ones you can't really prevent, to be honest with you. Even androgenetic alopecia, which is male or female pattern alopecia, you can't really prevent it. Like we haven't really like figured out like something that we can give to people and like guarantee them that they're not going to get this, but we can do our best to kind of get ahead of it before it catches up to people, right? So I mean, and you know, I'm going to preface this by saying anything that I'm saying is like not medical advice. You should always see your doctor, right? We're not, you know, diagnosing or offering treatment suggestions here, but in general, like minoxidil or Rogaine, there's a large amount of research showing that that can be very beneficial in stimulating hair growth for people, and so that helps. There's certain shampoos, right? Like caffeine containing shampoos can help. And then there's like Nizoral or ketoconazole containing shampoos that can help too. So there are things over the counter. Like, and then another one that I see a lot of my colleagues talk about is like pumpkin seed oil, actually. That can help too. So again, not making any sort of treatment suggestions. You should always see a doctor, but these are some things that can help.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and obviously I know you said it's different for men and women, but are there any certain triggers affecting it at all?
Yes. So there's hormone related hair loss, right? Which is like female pattern, male pattern hair loss. And a lot of that has to do with this without getting like into the nitty gritty, but like it has to do with your hormones, right? Like DHT, which is like a form of testosterone. In general, I see typically women will have a little bit later onset hair loss, whereas in men, believe it or not, it can start in 20s, 30s. So it obviously, you know, is distressing for people. No one wants to lose their hair. And so it's interesting to see that sort of age difference in terms of when it starts for, you know, men versus women, because, you know, I think for men, like, especially, I think it's important if they start seeing signs of this, that we start doing something early about it, because at some point, if you kind of just let it go and sort of put it off, it's gonna get to a point of no return, really. And so it's unfortunate when that happens.
And you've talked about men and women, and what is the main difference between men losing hair and women losing their hair?
Clinically, like when we're looking at people, women will have like a wider hairline, so that starts happening, and they start, you know, whereas with men, we've all seen bald men on the street, right? It usually like their frontal hairline starts going back, and then they start losing hair on their crown as well. So that's a pretty typical pattern for men versus women.
And is the definition of alopecia and hair loss the same? Would you be able to clarify a little bit of the definitions of those?
Yes, it's literally the same thing in clinic. When I tell someone they have alopecia, they sometimes freak out and they're like, "Oh my God, the A word." And I'm like, "It just means hair loss. Like, don't even like, that's not a diagnosis. It's just a medical word for hair loss." And I think a lot of people come in thinking that that's the diagnosis. So I think more people need to understand that it just means hair loss.
That's actually a really good question because I didn't know that. I kind of associated balding with men, and then alopecia was something completely different and a lot more like big and
Yeah.
I don't know.
When you say alopecia, it sounds so scary.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
thank you for clarifying that.
Of course.
And do you have any message of self-confidence for anyone who is suffering with hair loss that you've seen?
Yes, I mean, you know, obviously there are also a lot of studies on this, like, you know, our hair and our skin. I know we're not talking about that right now, but in general, both of these things can impact, you know, people's psychosocial well-being and how they present themselves. I would like to tell people, like, you know, it's really not anything that you've done or not anything to an extent that you have control over, right? Because a lot of it is governed by genetics, which unfortunately we have not gotten there yet to be able to manipulate that and change that. Maybe in the future, who knows? But so I do empathize with and sympathize with a lot of patients who have hair loss. And I think, you know, go to a dermatologist before it kind of catches up to you. There's so many people, especially on like social media, that will try to like sell you a supplement or give you a plan and say like I have the cure. Like Most of it is BS, to be honest. So, like, if you work with someone who is a board certified doctor, they will get you on the right treatment for your hair loss. So, and I realize like sometimes there's stigma about going to the doctor. Don't let it sort of impede you. You know, like no one cares. We see hair loss all the time. We don't care if you're coming early. We don't care, right? Like I would rather have a patient come in earlier rather than later because the longer you wait, you know, like I was saying, it's kind of the point of no return and the less we can do for you.
That's actually very fitting because our whole brand is about how there's a lot of misinformation online surrounding skincare, skin conditions, and everything. And sometimes you have to just embrace it. Sometimes you should just go to the dermatologist and they can help you straight away instead of reading 100 million different opinions online. So,
Right. And hair loss in particular is just one of those topics where people will try to sell a lot of their own stuff to you. Like, and I don't blame people. I think it's kind of taking advantage of someone who's emotionally vulnerable, right? Like most people with hair loss are not, you know, they have, you know, decreased levels of self confidence already. And now you're kind of on socials selling them something, they're going to be quick to get it.
yeah, naturally. So we've covered eczema, alopecia, and now we posted a TikTok video and it got a lot of responses. Some of you came up with some crazy stuff that you tried on your skin that I personally will not be trying unless Dr. Malik says it's a good idea, but I quite doubt it.
Yeah.
So the first one is actually relating to eczema. It was one of the only ones that was related to eczema. Our follower or viewer said that she used coconut oil on her eczema, and I'm paraphrasing this, but it looked like she'd put her face in a chip fryer. So I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe it does work.
It's definitely not like a first line treatment, right? Like, I guess there's a little bit of antimicrobial properties, but definitely like it's not something that I would recommend. And that's because like it can actually worsen eczema to an extent, especially because eczema patients already have heightened skin sensitivity. They're just more sensitive. And now you're putting coconut oil on them, which I understand it's like one of those home remedy things and it's readily available for people. But you know, there's a lot more data for moisturizers that have studied ingredients like petroleum jelly and ceramides, right? Things that will actually help repair your barrier. And then that's also not to say that coconut oil actually has a pore clogging capacity, so it can actually lead to the development of acne as well. So while trying to solve something, you might actually lead to another problem.
Okay, well, there you
Yeah.
are.
On a similar line, we've also seen someone in the comments saying they smothered Vaseline on their face for eczema. So, do you have any advice of that, of course?
I did pseudocreme for acne, so I'm not judging.
I think that's a much better thing to do, frankly, than coconut oil, especially on the face, because Vaseline is technically non-comedogenic, meaning it should not block your pores. However, if someone is super acne prone, I always tell them just take that with a grain of salt. You know, not everybody's skin reacts the same way. And so there's this, I'm sure you guys have seen it also, like slugging, right? Like where you're putting insane amounts of like these ointments on your face. I have mixed feelings about it. I think if someone is truly has eczema and is very dry, I think it could be helpful if done, if not overdone. But if someone has eczema but is also acne prone, which can happen, you can have both of those two things at the same time. I would steer away from that because it potentially can lead to acne developing. But in comparison to coconut oil, it's a much, much better alternative.
Well, that's interesting. That wasn't too far wrong then. I was wrong about there not being many eczema questions because there's another one. I think this follower, if I'm right, said that she put avocado on her face instead of eating it when she saw that it was good for eczema prone skin. So which one is correct?
I understand why. I feel like avocado has a lot of these like, you know, vitamins and fatty acids, but you know, when they're found when avocado is like found in skincare products, it's processed, right? Like it's manipulated. You're not putting raw avocado, and I realize especially on socials like the move these days is like all natural. Sometimes that can end up hurting people, just because you can potentially get, you know, a lot of irritant contact dermatitis, meaning you can develop reactions from different chemicals that are naturally found in things. And so I'm not a huge fan of that, even though avocado may have some benefit. Just use it, you know, in a like a formulated cream rather than putting it raw on your skin.
So we should stick to eating it. Just.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, someone else in the comments has also been using foods on their face. Someone said that they were rubbing raw potato and lemon on their face. I can't imagine that would have been very good.
That must
But can you
sting.
explain why?
So this is, I'll talk about the raw lemon first. That's actually even worse than avocado, and that's because any citrus, for that matter, it's highly acidic, and it can cause chemical burns on your skin. It can cause photosensitivity, meaning if you go out in the sun, even if it's not a summer day, it can still cause the citrus compound with the sunlight can cause a really bad reaction called phytophotodermatitis, which I don't know, maybe you've come across, but it leads to really, really strong dark spots and hyperpigmentation that take months and months to go away. So I do not recommend that. And I already talked about it burning your skin barrier, so it can make your eczema worse. And then also raw potato, I don't know why I wouldn't necessarily do that. It can actually have potentially bacteria on it as well that can, and patients with eczema already we know are a little bit more susceptible to getting bacterial infections. And so I don't think it's a smart idea to put something that may be ridden with bacteria on your skin when you have eczema because you might easily get an infection that way.
It is circling social media though. We have seen it, surprisingly.
People are putting everything on their face.
Which we're not judging, by the way, because we've all been desperate. We've all been there. I've put some questionable things on my face. So just we're laughing, but we're not judging. So what are the risks of making your own face mask out of crushed up aspirin? I must say that's the first I've heard of that.
I think so. Aspirin, it can actually similarly cause a lot of irritation, right? And so contact dermatitis is something that is something people should be aware of. So it can cause rashes. And those rashes, once they're healed, can cause a lot of hyperpigmentation, which can take a long time to go away. So you might be, doing yourself a disservice. And then also, there's a lot of it's not a controlled process when you're making your own aspirin face mask. Like, how do you know how much aspirin to use and how much water or whatever else you're using, right? Like, person to person might be doing different recipes and different things. And so I just don't think it's like a very reliable result that you're going to get there.
No, definitely not. Would you be able to explain a bit about what contact dermatitis is for people who might not know?
So contact dermatitis is basically when an external trigger factor, an allergen, something found in something of a chemical compound that's found in whether it's something you've made, something you're putting on, like a belt, piece of jewelry, whatever the case is coming into contact with your skin, and your skin's immune system is picking up some sort of allergen in that and mounting an immune response, and that leads to a rash, a lot of inflammation, basically.
Okay.
Perfect. And someone else also said they used coconut oil, but they said this time they used it to remove scars, but this ended up in fungal acne. Would you be able to explain a bit of this process of ending up with fungal acne?
Yeah, so fungal acne is basically something called Malassezia folliculitis. I know, very mouthful, long words, but Malassezia is a type of yeast that lives on our skin, and it actually feeds on the fatty parts of the coconut oil, right? And so coconut oil actually has a lot of fatty acids. And so what you're doing, to a degree, the amount of yeast that lives on our skin is normal, right? And so, but however, when you're putting things like coconut oil or other high fatty acid kind of things on your skin, that yeast that lives on our skin is feeding it, right? It's feeding off of the fatty acids and it's growing more and more. And so it's present on a higher level than what it should be. And that's when you get these tiny little bumps potentially all over your face or wherever you're putting your coconut oil. And that's what we call fungal acne, where basically that yeast is causing those tiny little bumps. And so that's treated differently than regular acne is.
Okay, interesting.
Perfect.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Well, we actually have a lot more, but that will be covered in another episode. So if you want to hear more crazy things, and surprisingly they get a lot worse, then tune into our next episode. Thank you, Dr. Malik, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering all of our questions. And that's it, really. Well, if you've heard anything that you have any questions about, then let us know, definitely, whether that be on social media or in the comments of our podcast. whether that be fungal acne or contact dermatitis. We've covered a lot. So that's it from me.
We will see you in the next episode where we're covering all things retinol and tretinoin. So we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malik.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.